You're familiar with Ursula K Le Guin? You know Ursula K Le Guin, don't you? One of the most influential and powerful authors of modern history. The GOAT when it comes to science fiction and fantasy. I mean, when it comes to science fiction, her name's right up there. You've got Isaac Asimov, you've got Arthur C. Clarke, and you've got Ursula K Le Guin. Her fantasy books influenced authors like Neil Gaiman. She is the GOAT when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, and yet she is the latest author whose books are under the crosshairs of censorship. And the worst part is, the person censoring her words is none other than her own son. Shocking. Let's talk about it. Hi guys, it's me, and I'm making a quick video because I'm all fired up. I'm really cross. And I'm cross because I discovered an article on LitHub by Theo Le Guin, who is the son of Ursula K Le Guin, explaining, well, the article explains everything. Why I decided to update the language in Ursula K Le Guin's children's books. So, Ursula K Le Guin, hopefully you are all familiar with her, because you should be. She is one of the most influential and powerful authors of the modern era. She's, one person described her as the greatest American writer of her generation. I certainly think of her up there as like one of the big three. When you talk about science fiction writers, it's Isaac Asimov, it's Arthur C. Clarke, and it's Ursula K Le Guin. Her fantasy books Harry Potter wouldn't exist if J.K. Rowling hadn't read Ursula K Le Guin's books. Neil Gaiman, he was practically teared up in 2014 when he gave Ursula K Le Guin the Book Writers Prize, because she had such a huge influence on him as a writer. He said, he was able to speak to her one time, yet she had been speaking to him for 22 years. So it is difficult to understate the significance and importance of Ursula K Le Guin's books. And she wrote a lot, and she wrote, across a lot of different genres and categories. Maybe you know her best as a fantasy writer. Maybe you know her best as a science fiction writer. She wrote a lot of kids' books as well. And it's kids' books that are apparently causing problems. So Ursula K Le Guin, sadly she passed away in 2018, aged 88, so she had good innings, and she was very sprightly right up until the end. And after that, her son became literary executor of her books. And I think it was in 2022, the decision was made to move Ursula K Le Guin's books to a new publisher, and that publisher reached out to Theo Le Guin and said, I'm writing to propose several minor changes to the language of the children's books in particular, to remove words that now have different connotation to when the books were originally published. And the words in question were lame, queer, dumb, and stupid. A total of 7 instances across 3 books. And Theo Le Guin decided to authorize these changes. Not only did he decide to authorize these changes, he also decided to write an incredibly self-congratulatory article on LitHub about it. And I'm really offended. I'm really offended. Theo Le Guin, who the hell do you think you are to go around changing the words of your mother's book? And that's the problem, because he's like, well, she's my mother, I can do that. That's the problem with the estate of Ian Fleming. They're like, we are Ian Fleming's family. If we want to change the words of his books, we can do that. And I guess technically you can, but you can't really, because the thing about writers, when they write books and put them out into the world and people adopt them and people embrace them, is those books to a certain extent cease to belong to you, the rights holder, anymore. I mean, they do belong to you in a legal sense, but in a greater sense, they don't. You've put them out there. They mean so much to other people. It's like Harry Potter. Everyone's upset with J.K. Rowling, but people still love Harry Potter because you can separate that from the author to a certain extent. But just like with Roald Dahl, this particular article was kind of comparing the situation of Roald Dahl's books. The thing that's really annoying about this whole situation with Ursula K Le Guin's books is 4 words over the course of 3 books, 7 instances of 4 words caused trouble and needed to be changed according to the editor. It was suggested that they were changed. And you think that's so stupid. It's not like the Ian Fleming books where you were actually talking about words like Negro, which these days would, even though it was that was the way black people would describe themselves back in the 1950s to this day and age, that's a troublesome word. And then the N word in particular, that is a really difficult word. So when we're talking about censorship, the Ian Fleming books, you can have a conversation about that. But when you're talking about kids' books and you're talking about lame, queer, dumb, and stupid, then, those are pretty inoffensive words to have in a book anyway. And the thing that really annoys me is that the editor was like, these words have a different connotation to when the books were originally published. And it's like, that's fine. But they didn't have a different connotation when the books were published. And where do you begin or end with this whole thing of going into books and changing words because you feel that the connotations of the words have changed? And then have the connotations of the words changed? I mean, the 4 words in question were lame, queer, dumb, and stupid. I can tell you one, stupid means today what it meant then. Stupid is a great word. Let me use stupid in a sentence. Changing the words in Ursula K Le Guin's children's books is stupid. There we go. It means the same thing today that it meant all the way back then. Dumb. Dumb is a word that has evolved over time. These days, when you say something's dumb, you think it's stupid. Or it's not particularly well thought out. It's idiotic. I mean, you could say something like changing the words of Ursula K Le Guin's children's books is dumb. See, that's appropriate. Way back in the day, dumb meant you couldn't speak. If you were deaf and dumb, you couldn't hear and you couldn't speak. How did Ursula K Le Guin use the word dumb in her books? I think you'd find it's closer to the modern way we use it than the traditional way that the word originated. Queer. Queer is an interesting word. Queer really is an interesting word because queer today does mean something else. Queer is a word that people in the LGBTQ, well, it's the Q in LGBTQTA plus. I don't know. That's got quite long. I remember back when I was at university, it was only LGB, and now it's quite a long thing. But queer is a word that people who live outside of like the heteronormative binary of heterosexual male, female, they're queer. And that's actually a really, really good word to describe people like that. I really like it. And the reason I like it is because of the way the word queer, well, what the word queer originally meant. And it's the way that Ursula K Le Guin actually wrote it in her books. Queer meant odd, strange, unexpected. Specifically, queer meant something that was unexpected given your understanding of the situation, yet at the same time seemed rational to make sense if you understood what the thing you didn't know was. So if I'm looking through my sales statistics and I have an unexpectedly good day, I'm like, that's a bit queer. And then you look through and say, oh, look, there we go. Somebody wrote a blog post about me. And so I've got lots of people buying my books because of that blog post. That explains it. Queer means something that's strange and unexpected and yet down the line completely explicable. And I really like that in terms of how that word has been adopted by the queer community. But my mother still uses the word queer to describe things. Like she'll say, I'm feeling gay today, because she means happy, because she was born in 1945, and so that's how people spoke. And the words that she's used her entire life still mean to her the same things. You can't go around and start policing words. I use the word queer sometimes like that. Something is unexpected. Yeah, I think it probably makes sense if I knew the piece of information that was missing. I'll say, that's a bit queer. And I don't mean any offense by it, because that is the word. And that's how I was introduced to the word, and that's what the word means to me. And I also respect and am aware of the fact that the word queer is used by the queer community, and I think that's great. But the word, to me, also means what it originally means. And whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, it's a conversation. And that's the thing about changing words in books, is if you start changing the words in the books, then you start eliminating the ability to have a conversation about what the words mean. Nobody, like Ursula K Le Guin's books, they're a testament to a period in history in which she wrote, and it's amazing. And you look at them, and these days she's passed away, so she's not writing any more books. So these aren't the books that are like hitting the bestseller ranks all the time. People who read them are people who have an interest in literature, an interest in science fiction, an interest in writers and the the ability to write in the English language. And so you want the words to be sacrosanct. So when you go back and examine them, you can look at them accurate to how they were when they were written. And then you can discuss, oh, isn't it interesting? She used these words, but these words have changed. That's a conversation. That's what keeps books and literature and the legacy of Ursula K Le Guin alive. But no, Theo Le Guin knows better than the rest of us and decided that he was going to change the words because he knows better. He knows better than his own mother, and he knows better than the rest of us. And it's really upsetting to me. It's really, really upsetting to me. And I think the thing that really upsets me is just how self-congratulatory the article he wrote about it was. There was this wonderful section in it, here we go, where, here we go, he was, closest, so he was talking about how he was anxious of the reaction that he would get for authorizing changes to his mother's books. And closest to my anxiety, he writes, was the reaction of Susan Nozzle of Penn America, who counsels us to consider how the power to rewrite books might be used in the hands of those who don't share our values and sensibilities. And Theo Le Guin writes, this haunts me, but people who don't share my sensibilities about artistic freedom seem to refer to banned books or burned books, usually without having read them. Is that true? No. Here I am making a video about how you shouldn't go around changing Ursula K Le Guin's words, and that's because I want to preserve them because I have read them. And I don't want to ban books or burn books. What you're writing is like, that's almost offensive. That's the antithesis of why I don't want books to get buggered about with. And it's that self-congratulatory, smug arrogance behind making statements like that. It's like, well, I'm going to change these books, and if you don't like me changing these books, well, that's because you're the kind of person who probably doesn't read books and wants to ban them or burn them. Bugger you. Seriously, Theo Le Guin, bugger you, up yours. No, that's not why we want to preserve these books. We want to preserve these books because we want them to be the books that we read. We don't want, the whole point of books is books are a shared experience. Neil Gaiman spoke about how Ursula K Le Guin had spoken to him for 22 years because she'd read his books. And it's more than that. She'd spoken to all of these other thousands, millions of readers. And when one of those people who's read the book meets Neil Gaiman, reads one of her books, meets Neil Gaiman, they can discuss this book because they've had that same shared experience. And that's why it's so important that you don't have people down the line changing the words of these books, because that changes the experience. It breaks the covenant. These words are sacrosanct, especially in this case, because they didn't need to be changed because they're not offensive. I honestly, to me, it's, in this particular instance, just the odious way in which Theo Le Guin was so smug and self-congratulatory about authorizing these changes. To me, it's almost like a dog marking its territory. Back when I used to work in corporate America, you know, we'd have to get things okayed by all the bosses and things. And sometimes you get a lot of bosses who you'd think would make changes to stuff that you'd created, not because he thought that they needed to be changed, but just so further down the line he could have a paper trail of how he'd actually been involved. He'd marked his territory like a dog urinating or something. And to me, it's got to this stage now that where the literary estates of famous writers decide to authorize changes, it's literally like they're dogs trying to mark their territory. So later on down the line, they can be like, oh yes, well, you know, we changed the words to that because, you know, we have to be more respectful to modern sensibilities. It's like, no. If you don't change the words, then they exist as they are, and that's a subject for discussion. If you change the words, then you're just rewriting stuff, and you are like a dog pissing on something. So I'm really, really disappointed with that decision. At the end of the day, you know, 7 instances in 3 books of 4 words. I guess it's not a monumental change, but it's a completely unnecessary change. And the thing that's even more unnecessary about it is Theo Le Guin being so smug about how he is changing the words that his mother has written, because those words are so deeply important to so many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of readers. And I think it's disgusting that you think you have the right to change them. Anyway, I'm quite heated about this, as you can tell. But, and I'm sure Theo down the Guin is a very nice person. And I'm sure if I went to the pub with him, I'd have a very nice time and I'd buy him a beer. So I'm not trying to be like mean or bullying or anything, but I think it's a really, really bad, shameful decision. I think it's unjustifiable, and I think it kind of disgusts me. It kind of disgusts me, and it's almost, this whole thing is almost turning me into like an advocate for protecting literature, especially the literature of people who passed away. I mean, their books are their books. You can't go around changing stuff like that, because it changes those books and it robs the people who read those books of the authentic experience. I don't know, I could go on all day, couldn't I? But yeah, don't accept any of it. Let's not accept any of it. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah, there's a link to that article down below. There's a link to the change petition down below that, to tell the estate of Ian Fleming not to change the words of Ian Fleming's books. If you haven't already, please sign that. That would be great. If you don't think I'm a twat, then you could subscribe. That would be great. If you do think I'm a twat, don't subscribe, and don't hit that bell notification so you'll get every single video that I make directed to your feed. Definitely don't do that if you think I'm a twat. But if you don't think I'm a twat, then stay tuned, because we'll be back with more videos soon. And in the meantime, let's not bugger around with the works of famous authors, please. Thank you. I'm Roland Hume. I've sold 67,000 copies of my books. If you want to find out how I did it, I've got the link right here you can click. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more videos coming soon. Thank you.